Good evening. Hello.
I will call to order the City Council Special Budget Study Session for April 15th, 2019. The roll call, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Slater?
Here.
Councilmember Abraham? Here. Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Here.
Councilmember Henderson?
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Here.
Councilmember Pennington?
Here.
All present. One discussion item this evening, proposed fiscal year 2019-2020 annual budget and three-year budget. So it's basically a continuation from the last study session, so I'll turn the meeting over to City Manager Miller. Good evening.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor and members of council, and once again, thank you for putting your time and attention to the budget. It's the most important thing. Once again, thanks to all the staff who's helped out. So let's jump into this. First, we're gonna have some discussion topics on where we need some direction from council, and that's on transportation services, the refuse millage, Niles Barnard House, and Sylvan Glen Pro Shop. And then we have discussion topics which are more for information, because it's going to be a future issue for council, and that's the Aquatic Center, Trails and Pathways, and library funding. And then finally, we have some responses from the last study meeting, an overview of the bond rating, and then charter revision input from council. And if we have any other final questions. So we'll start right into it, and want to go into the transportation services, and strategy number 6 says determine public transportation service needs and implement a revised plan for the Big Beaver Shuttle and Medigo. So currently in our budget, we have funds set aside for the Big Beaver Shuttle, and it provides service to the Big Beaver corridor. The city spends about $230,000 a year. Weekly ridership is about 372, and the cost is about $11.79 per rider. We also have senior and specialized service transportation services provided through Medigo. Medigo is a part-time type of organization that provides full-time services. There is limited city oversight over Medigo's day-to-day operations, and there is an increased demand. The city allocates $180,000 from smart credits and pays $100,000 to support the services. Excuse me, I had a nagging cold for like 5 weeks, and it's hard for me to talk. There are needs and available funding. What we're suggesting is that we bring the senior and specialized services in-house, which would require the following positions. And Kurt, go ahead.
So these positions were done by researching other communities that host similar services, and probably most equivalent to the city of Troy would be the city of Royal Oak. So these positions were being recommended based on Royal Oak services and in coordination with the current Medigo service, talking with their director, Gary Good, on what it would take, or what he feels would take to be a successful service if it was brought into the city of Troy in-house. So we've established a couple full-time positions there and several part-time positions based on that information.
So what we're recommending is that we redirect $230,000 from the Big Beaver Shuttle, use the $180,000 in smart credits, which must be used for public transportation, and then $100,000, which is currently dedicated from the general fund for Medigo, and provide for $510,000 for specialized and senior services provided through the city's forces. We did present this to the Financial Ideas team, and they did recommend that we move forward on this. And our recommendation is that we discontinue the Big Beaver Shuttle and start the senior specialized service transportation in-house. Now, this is not in the budget, and this is where we want to get your input on any direction you want to give to us. And you perhaps have a few options. You could continue going forward as we are now. You could continue going forward as now and discuss what to do in the future, or you could direct us to amend the budget we have submitted to you, which includes both Big Beaver Shuttle and Medigo continuing. So a little different format. This is a stop point where we really need to get input from council. And we're going to do that at each topic, just to be a little more effective.
I assume this was going to be a discussion this evening anyway, so we start with Mayor Pro Tem Baker. I think this was probably close to your idea, so maybe you could start.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. I appreciate city staff for putting together this plan. I think that this is a well thought out plan, something we talked about bringing Medigo in-house. I don't remember when it was, but it was several months ago at this point. I've been fairly clear over the past couple years about my concerns about the shuttle. I do have a question. The drivers that would be needed for Medigo, could the drivers that are currently driving the shuttle, is that something they would be eligible to do for those jobs, or is that a separate licensing?
Current drivers for the Big Beaver Shuttle would qualify. They do have the appropriate license to be able to drive for Medigo as well.
I can continue. I think that there have been some issues with Medigo, and bringing it in-house with more oversight and increased funding to provide a better service for the seniors of our community is a strong thing for our community and something that's very important. I know I've heard from most of you at different times over the past couple of years talking about the shuttle, various reasons for why you wanted to keep it or keep trying it. I am in favor of doing what this plan is, because I do think the shuttle, although a novel idea, I don't think it's right for our community, and I don't think it's worked as expected, and I don't see it working anytime in the next few years based on the trends we've seen since its inception. So I would be very supportive of something like this. I don't know, I feel, I guess, now that the idea of people who have come to use the shuttle on a regular basis, I know there are some of those people, but I'm hopeful they can find alternative transportation, and maybe some of them are seniors that could qualify for Medigo use if necessary. You never know.
Councilwoman Abraham, did you have any comments?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I'm collecting my thoughts on this one. Certainly, we had worked with SMART quite a bit over the past 2 years to make the Big Beaver Shuttle more successful, and while it became more successful, it didn't, I'll say, hit a level of success that is sustainable. And certainly $11.79 per rider is not a sustainable business model that we want to maintain. Do we have any other commitments to SMART or?
So Kurt Bovesi can kind of respond to this, because we have been in discussions with SMART going back 3, 4, 5 months ago.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry, could you just clarify the question?
Well, we had worked with SMART to get, buses that looked a little bit more like trolleys or had that effect, and tried to work with them, I'll say, in a few different ways. Do we have any other commitments to SMART that we're obligated to fulfill, or can we drop it without it being an issue with SMART?
We can discontinue that community partnership within, I think it's a 30 or 60-day notice to SMART. SMART is aware. Madonna, who sits on the IGO board, and she works for SMART. She is aware of what's going on. SMART has delayed moving forward with ordering the trolley based on tonight's decision or the budget discussion. So they have delayed. We have received new smaller buses, not the trolley, the transit buses, that SMART is suggesting could be repurposed to the Medigo operation if council agrees to a new community partner program taking that service in-house.
Kurt, we have discussed the possibility of this, and they are open to doing another community agreement, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. We actually have the community partnership agreement with SMART. It obviously has not been executed because it wasn't brought to council. I think in a report I provided several months ago suggesting that we would make this City Manager Miller would make this a budget topic instead of trying to do something mid-year.
All right, thank you.
Councilwoman Hodder?
If we were only going to be able to get one, from the get-go, the vision on the Big Beaver trolley idea was 4 trolleys connected hopefully to a regional transit authority plan that was going to be voted on. none of that happened. It's like we were anticipating some options to come into play. If we did this now and say 2 or 3 years from now, the I-75 project is done, some sort of a regional transit, much better program is in place, could we then step back into a new or an additional partnership that would allow us to reinstate potentially a Big Beaver trolley if we saw an opportunity there?
I can't speak for SMART, but I know there are communities such as Royal Oak and Ferndale who have a Medigo type service in-house and who also have other community partnership programs with SMART that have that type of transit. So I think it's possible. I mean, it would be an additional agreement with SMART, and I think they're all about public transportation, and that would be a partnership that I think they would be amenable to.
And we have an immediate need now with our seniors and Medigo. And the need on I-75, well, there's a vision there. If we could set that aside for now to meet this immediate need in the budget. Okay. I got it. I'm processing this myself right now. Thank you.
I think City Manager Miller's going to look for consensus, as you know, Ryan. So I hear consensus from the three of you here. Councilman Hamilton?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have too much else to add. To me, I've clearly seen the value of Medigo to our community. Investing more in that is definitely going to be worth it. And $11 a ride is steep. You could probably take an Uber or Lyft for $11 anywhere along the Big Beaver corridor. It's unfortunate because my history in the auto industry, I know the value of public transportation. And when it's done right, it can be much more cost effective than everyone driving everywhere. But in this case, clearly, it's not cost effective.
Excuse me.
And to support Medigo, and what did it say, 500 people aren't able to meet their needs, 500 requests were unmet in 2018. It clearly seems that's the way to go. So I'm on board.
Councilman Pennington, that's 4, so.
Yeah, well, it's just disappointing that, that we came to this. It's when we, at inception, it was a great idea. And it seems like the hospitality, hotel hospitality, restaurant community just didn't come on board. Obviously, if this count of 372 weekly ridership, that's over a year. How many years is that? Is that just 1 year, or I mean, what?
372 is an average since the Big Beaver shuttle service began in December of 2016.
So it was obviously ramping up a little bit per year, but not enough to, at $11 per rider. It doesn't sound like it's enough to keep it moving forward. And we never got more than one trolley. It was just the one trolley, right?
That's correct. Just one trolley, and SMART has only committed for one trolley.
Right.
And the trolley we've been using is an older one, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah. So it just doesn't seem like it. Just never got full support from the word go, and that was disappointing.
Councilman Anderson, you have anything to add?
Yeah, I wrote a few notes based on the last quarterly report we had on the Big Beaver shuttle. It seems like we designed our own failure on this because, at its inception, we were talking about 4 trolley type vehicles. We talked about an app, we talked about advertising, we talked about a lot of support from the business community, none of which happened really to augment this and make it a real success story. That said, the next 2 years, Big Beaver is going to be torn up, and shuttle may be a little bit difficult to operate. So maybe a stop-start. I don't think stop-start is a good policy generally, but maybe we stop it for the short term until this is all cleared up, and then maybe give it another whack. But if we do this again, there's a few things, and I know we've asked for this. Councilman Baker's headlined this, but what does success look like? We have to figure out what that is before we jump into this again in the future, and then deliver on things like apps and a marketing plan to be able to go forward. The questions I have would be in relation to the Medigo plan. I mean, that's a lot of money too. I mean, that's significantly more money a year than the shuttle is. Are there economies of scale that we could realize with operating both? I mean, that was talked about a few months ago. If we operated both of those plans, can the drivers overlap and the vehicles overlap? Is that an impossibility or a possibility?
could be a possibility, but what we propose is redirecting the Big Beaver funds to provide the Medico type service in our model.
Right, I understand that, but did we do any research in this to try to figure out whether or not you could do both? And would it be incremental costs additionally to do both, or
So
how much more?
Sure, the hours of operation right now for the Big Beaver shuttle are outside of what Medigo operates as. Big Beaver shuttle starts at 4 o'clock, goes to 11 o'clock at night. Those are part-time positions. So, and the biggest cost in both the operations are the personnel, because it's a zero-cost lease other than the fuel and maintenance for the vehicles. So the biggest cost are personnel in both services. There's really not any opportunity, because they are part-timers, to increase their hours. Then they would become full-time employee and full-time staffs with all the benefits that come along with it. So you would have the same number of employees. You'd be able to share the same buses. It limits the opportunity to do maintenance, because we don't have a midnight shift in our fleet division. We only have an afternoon shift. So we would have to coordinate that. But as far as employees go, there wouldn't be any opportunity to reduce the number of employees. You'd have the same number of employees to operate both services.
So the labor costs would still be what we're experiencing now. Of course, the vehicles we could swap out.
Bless you.
Okay. That's all I have.
I thought we made a decision last year to bring Medigo in-house, so I don't think this is anything new. It's just making the program bigger, which I haven't seen what the plan is to make it bigger than what we allocated the $100,000 for last year. That's my understanding. So, looks like there's consensus, Mr. Miller. So,
Mayor, with that comment, I think what we need to do is develop a strategy and share that with council.
thank you.
Actually, I got a quick question before we finish that up. Sure. Do we have availability of the numbers for Medigo for years past also? I mean, we do, so I mean.
I have that with me, just a brief summary.
Well, what Kurt's looking at, one of the things that we would bring forward is we'd bring technology, our IT department, and a little more professionalism above and beyond the way that they're delivering the services now.
Okay.
And hopefully that gave Kurt some time.
No, unfortunately, I did not print that to give you the numbers of how many riders Medigo services a year. Just all I have, data I have right now is how many riders were not met.
Okay.
We can get that information.
Actually, that was probably in that presentation we had before. But
Yeah, I think.
It was a while ago.
yeah.
Councilman Henderson.
It would be nice to see that number, because, I'd like to see how it compares to the 3,600 riders a quarter that the Big Beaver shuttle has. Is it more than that, do you think, or less than that?
Go ahead, Kurt.
Yeah, it was very close, if I remember correctly, a little bit more than what we're servicing on Big Beaver. But I think what's different is, by accepting that service in-house, we can provide quicker, better service. We can advertise that service better. Medigo right now isn't really advertising that service, so we could be servicing other people that may not be aware of that service using city resources. So I expect the number to grow from what Medigo was servicing, especially on the 500 that were missed.
The follow-up question to that is, this is like three times or better, more expensive to put the Medigo budget together than the Big Beaver shuttle. So how does that, am I reading that incorrectly, or no?
Combine them both.
Well, I think that's the way that we're delivering the services.
Correct. So the total, Medigo's revenue is $261,000 currently. That includes rider fares, that includes other donations from Beaumont. Some things we're not considering if we take that in-house, whether we would continue on with those revenue opportunities. Where it differs is they service less riders because they take them longer distances as well. So it's not an apples to apples type of thing where it's a very short transit ride for the Big Beaver shuttle. For the Medigo service, they service 3 miles outside of the city of Troy too. And although they try their best to coordinate and pick up as many people as they can and fit it into their route, they're not fully utilizing that software to its full potential to be able to organize and pick up as many riders as they possibly can, at least from my observation. So the cost, there is a cost difference, but it is really two different types of services being offered.
And they pick them up
At
at
their
the
house.
residence, right?
That's correct.
That's-
And
that's
take
a big
them
difference.
to their destination and then return them from their destination to their residence.
And as of right now, the only way to get an appointment is to call.
Mm.
There's no technology.
I hope I answered
No,
the question. Okay.
you're on the right track with,
Okay.
with where I was thinking. And the other question I would have then is the marketing efforts. It would be substantially better than what we put into the Big Beaver shuttle, correct?
Yeah, well, the Big Beaver Shuttle, you have to remember, wasn't a position dedicated to that service. We took existing positions and added to the responsibility of that position. Where we're suggesting here, because we're suggesting 2 full-time people to actually be in charge and a part of the, lack of better terms, the Medigo service in the city of Troy. So there's a lot more opportunity to have someone specialized in that field that can go out and market and really advertise that and boost those numbers. And Mr. Lambeau just provided some great numbers as we were talking. And it looks like riders in the calendar year 2018 were just over 3,300. So that's 2018.
In 2018, there were 3,300 riders.
Formed the Medigo service.
Okay, that's individual riders, but that's not necessarily how many times they rode
Well,
the,
you know what, I think I may have got that wrong. I was looking at hours.
because that's 1 month of Big Beaver shuttle.
Yes, I'm sorry. You are absolutely, that is 19,382. I read the wrong column.
So it's still about 1,000 less than the Big Beaver, well, not necessarily, because it's a quarter for 2017. Let's just say it's an equivalent amount for, about 3 times as much, but you're right, you're breaking up. a
Longer
number.
distance,
Got it.
yeah.
Okay, great.
More of customized rides.
Right, yep, thanks.
Yeah.
Totally different use.
Right, and I think this would be a great thing to utilize our volunteerism in the city, and I've in the past have participated in hackathons or codathons that are volunteered. I think this could be an opportunity to utilize our residents to maybe come up with something to make the service better. I don't know, just an idea we can pursue in the future.
I think we got consensus to move forward here.
Okay, well, I'll wait till a minute. I just remember a lot of seniors don't use a lot of cell phone apps.
Oh, yeah.
They like to call.
We know.
So just keep that in mind. Okay.
Well, also Medigo had problem just answering the phones and scheduling anything. They weren't there full-time. Okay.
I think we're good to go.
All right, the next topic is the refuse fund and millage rates, and Kurt is going to have one slide, and then Tom Darlington will take a couple of it. As you recall from our meeting on Thursday, we did increase the refuse millage from .07 to .09, and what this presentation will be a justification of why we did that.
So just a reminder that the city of Troy is part of the SACRA consortium. We are one of the 11 other members of that consortium, and we're able to do a lot of things that some communities can't because we deal in volume. One of those things is instituting single stream recycling, which we did a couple of years ago. It's been very successful. As you can see here from the statistics, our recycling went up 23%, and our trash volume went down 5%. There's not a direct correlation there because our trash volume is so much bigger than our recycling. Well, we like to see one go down and one go up, so that's a good sign. What we're experiencing now is last year we were going through the budget process with SACRA. There was a lot of assumptions made in what those recyclable goods were worth. And we've seen a drastic, unexpected decline in those recyclable goods being marketed. SACRA has marketed those products across the country, And one thing to keep in mind, which is very important now more than ever, is the contamination of those products. So we can leverage the best dollar for everything we sell, is those have to be contaminant-free. These companies from across the country actually visiting soccer and taking samples and determining its contamination level and giving us prices based on that. So you're going to see a big push in the next year to make sure that our recyclers recognize the importance of not only recycling, what's the difference between good recycling and bad recycling, because it does make a big difference. And that is, all of this information is going to be reflected in what we're proposing in the budget.
So let's go ahead and look at some of the numbers, starting with 2020. Revenues about 5.3 million, and our expenditures are about 5.4 million. So it looks like we're losing 100,000 to 200,000 to 300,000 over our 3-year budget, as it stands right now with the 1.07 mils. So this is what it looks like using the same millage rate. As you can see, then fund balance starts from 800,000 and basically goes down to, would be a deficit position by 2022, and as managers of the city, we would never propose a budget that goes into a deficit position. So let's look at then the proposed 1.09 mils, and again, this isn't necessarily an overall millage increases, but basically redirecting 0.02 mils from the debt service fund to the refuge fund to try and make this a little more stable. And if you remember last year's budget meeting, we had the same discussion. Remember, and we were going to look at it for another year, see how the single stream did. Was it going to, stabilize it a little bit? And so here we are again this year to have the same discussion. Again, even with the 0.02 extra mils, which is basically 100,000 a year, you can see we're still looking at like a slight loss. At least we're trying to break even somewhat in 2020. At least that's why I look at it. Going forward, we're not sure, but again, we want to take baby steps, right? Let's try 0.02 before I take something that makes us look, perfect, right, across the board. So, so that's where we're at, and that's why we're recommending that. Again, if we take a look, again, I got 20 to 30% as just because that's what we do for the general fund. I'm not necessarily saying that's right or wrong for the refuge fund. But if we take our existing 1.07 mils in the green, you can see we end up here with the 1.09 mils as far as fund balance goes. We still end up in around a 10% position, at least as it stands now under current projections. 1.09 mils is not unfamiliar to the refuge fund. It was 1.09 mils back in 2014. Then we did drop down. It was 1.05. Remember, we were really heading towards the bottom when it was 1.05 mils. We might have, to try and get stability, and we raised it to 1.09. We've seen how things were changing. We decided, 1.07 ought to be good. And it was working fine again until we kind of came into the single stream recycling and some of the issues that Kurt's already went through.
So, we did present this to the financial ideas teams, and they do not oppose this, and so we're recommending that the refuge millage rate be raised by 0.02 to stabilize fund balance, and we will monitor the expenses over a few years and reevaluate the future. And it generates approximately $100,000 a year. And once again, this is baked into the current budget, and this is just an opportunity for council to give us your support of what's in the current budget as we recommended.
Thank you. Anyone in council wish to discuss this further? Council members.
I just want to point out that the 2019 actual is $125 a year to have a garbage taken away.
Yeah.
Per household.
Yeah.
And I know we did this exercise a few years ago. We compared it to Shelby. I think it's like a third of what you might pay for that same service in Shelby Township. So, we get a real good value for our services, and just to maintain that fund balance is,
Absolutely. I think it's 136 as well with the extra millage, right? Is that the one before?
Yeah, another dollar, less than a dollar.
So, I think it's a very great value for our residents.
Can I ask a question about the recycling those? That you'd say that contaminated recycling, and if somebody throws a greasy pizza box in the recycle bin, that's thrown out when it gets to the
Well,
Does that cost us for them
well,
to?
I think Kurt could probably explain it better. My understanding is that the companies come in and take samples, and if we happen to have a lot of contamination, they won't want to buy from us. Is that a fair statement, Kurt?
It's a fair statement. And in regards to like your cardboard, your greasy pizza boxes, so everything is, even though it's single stream, it is gone through, it is separated. So that would end up as refuse because it's not a recyclable good. The intent is to capture those contaminants before it gets into the production line and before it's packaged up to be sold. So Sacra does have staff it's a big conveyor belt. Some of you have seen it, that look at those contaminants, pull it off, and those do end up as refuse. So important pizza boxes, you can tear off the top that doesn't have any pizza or grease on it, recycle the top of the box, but throw away the bottom.
Just to follow up, so what are there metrics that Soccer uses to monitor what the contamination rate is? Are we close to 99.5%?
We are really, really good as communities in recycling. We're not quite at that level, but we're very good. In fact, we're just going to be entering into an agreement to take third-party recycling from Rochester Hills as an additional revenue stream to offset the cost to member communities like the city of Troy. Rochester Hills was looked at because they've been doing the single stream for so long. They are viewed as good recyclers as well. Very, very cautious on who we accept third-party recycling from because of that as well.
Any other comments?
Next topic is the Niles Barnard House, which Kurt is going to, sorry Kurt.
It's okay. I get all the fun ones. So I know there's a lot on the slide, but I think it's pertinent to go through some of it. I want to go over the obligations the city has to the Niles Barnard family, or who we accepted the donation from, and the Troy Historic Village. In 2005, when it was accepted, we did have in the donation agreement that the city shall remain open to the public for tours in a manner similar to the other buildings located at the Troy Museum and Historic Village. In 2010, that donation was completed by the Troy Historic Society relocating the house to the Troy Historic Village. That brings us to the most recent agreement with the Troy Historic Society in the 2016 agreement that obligates the city to maintain those buildings to a usable manner in compliance with the historic district in Chapter 13 of the local preservation ordinance. The city has made a lot of efforts to be able to fulfill that obligation. You can see the timeline here at the Niles Barnard starting back in December of 2017 when we began the process of renovating or designing the renovation for the Niles Barnard house. And the original renovation included a lot of things in the first floor, which was to replace those wall furnishings, widen some interior doors to be able to accommodate receptions and events, renovate the existing residential restrooms, become ADA compliant. That was for the downstairs restroom and the upstairs restroom, new kitchen cabinets and appliances for food preparation, and meaning that it was going to be intended to be a warming kitchen to be able to host events. The second floor included 2 new staircases, reinforcing the floor, which was a major cost, to be able to accommodate that light office, which was requested to be used on the second floor, and again, renovate that restroom. All new plumbing, mechanical, electrical throughout. There was a separate proposal to include an addition to accommodate the ADA entry compliance and some additional storage. We could have done that in a couple of different ways, so the addition was a separate proposal. So most recently, we've contracted with OHM, one of the city's consultants, to look at this project and redesign it after proposing to you. We let that bid. It came back at $1.2 million. A report was provided to City Council, and we were going to look at to see things, what we could do to make that more in budget. So the new scope actually includes the addition. It's not a separate proposal that's required. We found that it's going to be more economical to create those ADA compliant restrooms in the addition instead of trying to retrofit old residential restrooms to be ADA compliant. The first floor, it includes a lot of refurbishing of the walls and the floor instead of replacement. It's updating the electrical instead of replacing all the electrical and refurbishing the floors. The second floor, there will be nothing done to it. The second floor will be closed off for all access, so the second floor will not be used. The original budget back in 2017 was $450,000. We did use some of that to contract with Hopkins Burners to design what was bid out and resulted in the $1.2 million. The proposed budget for 2020 is $350,000. Again, that's using some of that $450,000 and rolling over what was left to next year's budget. OHM just completed the project estimate for the new scope of work that came in at $655,000. That is what, in my opinion, is the absolute bare bones that we can do, meeting two goals. One is to provide a space similar to the manner of the other historic villages, and also provide a product that the Troy Historic Society or the City of Troy can go in at a future time and add on. An example of an add-on would be the warming kitchen. So make sure that the kitchen has the capability to accept appliances, but don't make the appliances part of this particular scope of work. Or audio-visual equipment, or the ability to install audio-visual equipment one day is included in the new scope of work, but the audio-visual components are not included in the new scope of work. So those are just some examples of what we're trying to do to get that to meet our obligations and to be as close to budget as we possibly can, and still provide a product that could be added on in the future.
So where we're at right now is we need input and direction from council. And we see that there are three options. The first option would be to bid the project out, and when it comes in, do a budget amendment. Second option would be to increase the budget to $655,000. And the third option would be delay the project and until we could appropriate the necessary funds.
Thank you. I guess my first question is, we've had meetings and discussions, I assume, with the Historical Society leaders. At least the discussions I've had with them, they wouldn't be too happy with this.
We have the original scope of work. The Troy Historical Society was completely involved in that process. In the new scope of work, the city is doing that with OHM while communicating with the Troy Historic, the results of that to the Troy Historic Society.
I don't know how council feels, but it would be important for me to hear from the leadership of the society before I would want to make a decision here, and with your consent, could we waive the rules and allow the leadership to speak at this time? Could we?
Yeah.
Could we get you to come to the microphone if you want, or you can go up front, whichever's easiest.
Whichever's easiest for you.
Lorraine, I just want to get, I think the council would just like to get some input.
Thank you. First of all, I want to thank the city for what they've done so far. This has been obviously a decades-long project. Absolutely, Kurt is correct in saying that in doing a minimal restoration to the Niles Barnard house, you fulfill your legal obligation to the Barnard family, and we don't dispute that. That said, if we do a minimal restoration to the building, you will receive minimal use of the building, although the cost to maintain it will still be there. To provide the Niles Barnard house in a way similar to the other buildings, for example, the Caswell house, people can walk through it, people can see the history, we could put furnishings in it. Your directive to us for the past 7 years has been to use the resources in the village to the best advantage of getting as sustainable as we can be operationally. And that has been our goal all along. We agree with you 100%. Even doing a more modest restoration, and I think the idea of putting the restrooms in an addition is excellent. I do think that we can restrict the restoration to the main floor as much as possible. But you're going to get the better use of the facility if it is more functional and if it's more attractive to the user. We've talked about trying to use this building, because it has a larger footprint and more square footage, as a place where you, as city governance, could use the site for a reception, where we could use it for meetings, for facilities rentals, including wedding receptions. So for us, there's some things that are very important to make it that attractive and functional place. We know that we have to update the electrical on the main floor, but where we put those electrical outlets and the electrical service we would have put in for a warming kitchen is important. Similarly, water service is important. Any kind of time we have any kind of reception, whether it's a box lunch, a coffee, or a wedding reception, we need sinks. There should be cabinets. Electrical appliances, even something as basic as refrigerators, help use that facility for meetings and receptions that involve any kind of food. We've never asked for anything more than a warming kitchen. Similarly, the expanded archway was designed into the restoration to provide a line of sight so that if you put 50 people in that main space, they could see the screen or the flat screen TV that the Historical Society planned to buy to use for presentations, things like that. It's important for us also as historians that the restoration continue to comply with the most liberal standards for historic rehabilitation set by the federal government, and that we follow, that I have followed for the past 20 years in any restoration or repair project we've done in any of the buildings on site. And where I applaud the people we have worked with OHM, and I know they have architects available, we would hope that a historic preservation architect, either one we've used or one that they've used, could be identified to review the plans to make sure that we are complying with the standards for historic rehabilitation and preserving as much of the original fabric of the house as possible. There's something else that I would like to ask you to consider as a governing body for the city of Troy. Next year, 2020, is the 200th anniversary for Oakland County. How might the city of Troy and you use that opportunity to showcase this incredible city and the resources you have and how you provide access to them for the community? Back in 1976, Poppleton School was identified by City Council as a bicentennial project. It cost $80,000, a significant sum of money at that time, to restore that building. I would argue you've gotten 200-fold out of that restoration in terms of the tens of thousands of school kids and adults who have used that building and continue to use it to this day. Not to mention how you were able to use that opportunity to showcase the city and market it. It is your building. We only manage the resources for you, and we will continue to do whatever we can to make that operation sustainable. I think we've showed you in this room for the past 7 years how we've eked the numbers up every year. We have a business plan to infuse that building with facilities rentals. But the more bare bones the restoration, the slower we can proceed towards generating that revenue so that we are fiscally sustainable. That's our ultimate goal with you. Also, if we postpone doing things like putting appliances in, putting audiovisual in, somebody's got to pick up that cost. If it is the Troy Historical Society, if that is the perception down the line that we would generate those funds, then that restricts what we can put into operations. If we fundraise for those capital improvements for the city's resource, there's less for operations. I would turn to my board members who are here. Do you have anything to add? Did I miss?
Yeah, just.
We know your name, Ward, but
Ward
just-
Randall, Vice President of the Troy Historical Society. I just want to comment on the $655,000 bare bones estimate. In either the Rochester Post or the Rochester Gazette, within the last couple of weeks, there was an article about the Rochester Historical Museum rebuilding their rebuilding an equipment barn that was torn down to its original specifications. And this barn, the article said, has 2,000 square feet, and the cost to rebuild it, according to the article, was $720,000, with another $74,000, as I remember, for architectural fees. I believe the Niles, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the square footage, the usable square footage of the Niles Barnard House, when the addition is put on, will also be about 2,000 square feet. So the 655 is ballpark, it's bare bones, it's realistic in today's market, which is a tough market.
Yes, sir.
I'm John Lavender. I'm the treasurer of the Troy Historical Society. I just want to point out quickly, Kurt, I believe you said you'd just gotten that estimate recently from OHM. We participated pretty heavily in the first go-around. Historical Society has not participated in the second go-around, and since you've just gotten it, we have an opportunity, haven't any opportunity to look at it. So it may be some of the things we're talking about are already there. It may be some of them would be a little bit addition to that. At the moment, we don't really know that. But we would appreciate your consideration on these things tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions from council for staff? Councilman Henderson.
So, we talked about this about 2 years ago. Ethan and I went to, Councilman Baker and I went to Mayor Pro Tem Baker, and I went to the home and walked through it, and, you know, it needs some repairs, no question about it. And at that time, I think we all kind of stepped up and said, yeah, let's, you know, we need to do something with this home to make it presentable and usable. And we were presented with a budget entry of about $450,000, which seemed to be a lot of money at the time. And then when the project came to us this past year, I think we were all a little bit shocked at 1.2 million. It's about 150% increase, give or take. I didn't put the pen to it, but that's what it seemed like. And I don't know if the scope changed or what changed in the process, but we were given either bad intel initially, or maybe the scope of the project changed. And it amazes me that builders today can build a 3,500 square foot house from scratch and sell it for $750,000. You know, how can they put all that time, effort, materials, and costs in to a brand new home and sell it for $750,000 when there's significantly less cost involved in that? And I get the craftsmanship, and then, you know, you have to bring up the standards and codes and all that other kind of thing. But that just seems to me to be it's almost twice what a new home would be at $1.2 million. even at 655, that seems to be high to me. So I don't know the answers, I don't know what I'm fishing for necessarily, but I just don't, I'm not real comfortable with any of it at this point, because I don't have enough information to really be able to put a logical discussion together about this. The numbers don't make sense to me.
City Manager Miller, can anyone address that issue? It does seem like a logical point.
Go back a couple slides. So I also question the same, because further in the presentation you see an average square foot price for a commercial building, and it well exceeds this. So what I am learning through this process is that the repair, originally the original scope of work was actually to completely remove this wall here and replace it with traditional drywall, and insulate and some other things. Instead, what we're suggesting is to replace that wet plaster, and what we're discovering is there's not a whole lot of people that know how to replace that type of wet plaster, and I'm just using this as just one example. So they can pretty much name their price on those types of repairs. Even the requirements when we originally bid this scope of work, the requirements to have that historic preservation skill level or experience escalated that price, because there's not a lot of people out there with that type of skill level. What we're looking at is partly to reduce this cost, is take some of the non-historic preservation scope and maybe divide it up and say, okay, to repaint this building, the wood repair, you'd need to have some experience in repairing the wood facade, but to actually paint it, you don't need to have historic preservation experience to do that. We're trying to retrofit an older building, whether we do it with the original scope or the scope today. We're trying to take what was constructed over many, many years. As an example of this which was tried to level out a ceiling. If you remember when you were there, the 2x4s in the ceiling, we're trying to still capture that uniqueness or that historic value to that by making it today's code. And from what I'm learning through this process is there is a significant cost that you can't use a traditional square foot price because of that. It's putting up drywall on this ceiling is not the same as putting up drywall on brand new studs on a brand new house. These walls are not square. These walls are not plumbed to anything. And needs a level of experience to be able to deal with that, and a contractor willing to do that, knowing that they can go down the road to a brand new house, make a faster buck, than spend the time doing more tedious and more that requires higher level of experience.
So can I jump in? So on the plaster repair, if you're going to put period wallpaper over the top of it, who cares if it's plaster or drywall? And I'm not saying, let's cut all the corners we can cut to, just half do this. Mm-hmm. But certainly there's some things that could be done to decorate it up and make it look better and functional than, what they would have done, 150 years ago with skilled trades that's all they had is plaster. So again, the economies just don't make sense. I understand it takes a certain amount of skills to be able to craft, non-square walls and that kind of stuff. I get that kind of thing, but man, 150% increase over the original budget. And I circled the one statement that was in here. Shall remain open to the public for tours in a manner similar to the other buildings located at the museum. Most of those buildings you can't go upstairs. It's roped off. They're not used for that purpose. It's just the main floor. So I certainly am a fan, if we're going to do this, of just let's make the main floor what it has to be so that we can use it. The other question I would have is about parking. If we're going to use it for weddings and that sort of thing, how much parking is there? And is that a realistic situation? Is there additional parking overflow for a 200-person wedding?
There's no additional parking proposed in this plan.
Can I respond to that?
No, thank you. Thanks. Our rules don't, I think I can answer it for him. Okay, or I think staff can answer it. Thank you. there are many events that happen at the Historical Village where overflow parking is provided, you know, with shuttle buses, the church. I wouldn't look for that to be a deterrent. Plus, I think I remember there being something in the plans to adhere to that. I talk to developers a lot, and one of the first things I always hear from them is it's cheaper to tear a building down than it is to renovate the building in most instances. So I can see that here to some degree. But today I don't think we're looking at a budget of $1.2 million. We're looking at three things. Continue the project under the, consider the budget amendment and award that as a contract later. Increase the proposed budget to $650. And how much are we talking about there? We're going from $450 to $655. Is basically that what we're doing?
Current budget is budgeted at $350,000 in 2020.
So another $300. Delay the project until other capital priorities are met. So, could I just ask a question? You heard what Lorraine had to say about the amenities that are important to them. Does this include that?
This does not include any appliances. This does provide a sink and kitchen cabinets. They're not commercial grade cabinets. It will allow for future appliances to be added to this. So electrical will be provided to the kitchen to be able to add those appliances later. This does not include the widening of that doorway as is pictured. I apologize, it doesn't appear that I have a picture of it. So it does not include the widening of the doorway to be able to accommodate that field of view like Ms. Campbell was talking about. One of the concerns when OHM came in and when we had a project goal of trying to be as close to as possible within budget while still meeting the city's obligations is some of these taking that wall out could potentially discover other things that we're unaware of. You know, so we looked at that as going that's not essential to meeting our obligation and could potentially cost us more if we were to take that wall down for unforeseen. Same with the plaster, removing the plaster, putting up drywall. We had one of the original architects out there who moved the house who was actually suggesting that the plaster is a structural compound of the house. If we start taking that plaster down, we could potentially, because it's what's called balloon fabrication, we could potentially be shifting those walls and causing more damage than if we were just to replace the plaster.
Understood. All the more reason maybe to revisit this at a later date after the project is underway, because things are going to change. So maybe there might be a need for a budget amendment somewhere else down the line if we were to do the proposed budget. But I think Councilwoman Abraham had her hand up first.
Thank you. At one point, there was a federal grant that was gifted to the Historic Village in regards to this project. I think there were some time limitations with that grant. Is that grant still available to us, or did it lapse because we haven't acted in a certain time frame? I don't know if that's a question for city staff or...
I believe Lorraine Campbell can answer that.
I think if we're going to have a conversation with Lorraine Campbell, we're going to have to waive the rules and invite her to the table or something rather than try to adhere to our rules that we've established. So there's consensus to have an interaction with Ms. Campbell, we can waive the rules. If you want to, what's the Lorraine, I didn't mean to cut you off the other way,
That's
but our
okay.
rules.
To answer Mr. Anderson's question a little bit more directly. We currently have weddings in the village. The church seats 100 people. We accommodate the weddings by using the on-site parking and public parking on the south side of Lang Street if necessary. The capacity for the Niles Barnard House is the same number of people. So the idea is you have a small, intimate, charming wedding in the church, and then your guests move over to the Niles Barnard House for a similar size reception. So we would be using the same footprint of parking. In answer to your question, we currently we have a 5-year grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities. The first 2 years of that grant were strictly fundraising. We had to raise $50,000 in new donations to match $50,000 in federal money. We accomplished that goal. We were charged with developing an endowment fund, a permanent endowment fund to benefit the village. We have done that. We have $25,000 now in a permanent endowment fund to benefit the Troy Historic Village, held by the Troy Community Foundation. When we reached the $25,000 threshold fund, it became an investment account. We are now in year 3 of that grant, so we are required to expend $33,333 by my treasurer in this fiscal year, which will end in June, to increase capacity in the village, with the intent was that a portion of that capacity was new programming and facilities rentals in the Niles Barnard House. I am writing the last paragraphs of my interim report to the National Endowment for the Humanities today. It needs a final paragraph based on what you do this evening, and I try and be honest with them that we are still working with the city to get the Niles Barnard House restored so it can develop that capacity. But I am on the hook. I am reporting to them that we have expanded our program capacity this year, doing outreach programs, which we also mentioned in our original grant application, and the lucky fact that we are cultural passport program providers for Detroit Public Community Schools, and we've welcomed an additional 3,500 second graders from Detroit this year. So that's all good news. I'm going to be in a very challenged position, having to submit interim reports in the future to the National Endowment for the Humanities. Also, last year we received, or a year and a half ago, I received a capital grant from the Michigan Humanities Council. Again, a one-to-one match. So they gave us $3,000. We put in a little over $3,000 to buy tables and chairs and racks for those items so that we had furnishings to use for facilities rentals. I had to buy those materials in November of 2018. So we've already spent the money. We continue to look for grant opportunities. The challenge for all grants is the application period, the grant period that you have to spend the money in, and the program period are all different. So does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. I did have one other question.
For Lorraine?
For Lorraine.
Yeah.
When you had come last year advocating for this project, you had indicated that it was going to be used for revenue generating opportunities.
Right.
And that was based on the original scope of change to the house.
Mm-hmm.
Based on the revised scope, what is the impact to the revenue that was forecasted in terms of the revenue generating opportunities? Were you anticipating $30,000 in revenue before, and now with the lower scope it's 25, or I'm trying to gauge?
Right. We actually looked at low use and high use, so we had 2 tracks that we could follow, realizing that there's a startup period for any of this. And obviously, we have to kind of look at what the going rates for everybody else are. So the new barn that Rochester has is direct competition. Just about every museum that we know about is now using their facilities for rentals. The demand is high for unique venues. I'm sure all of you have gone to an outdoor beach-type wedding, and that's what everybody wants right now. They want Pinterest. Obviously, not having a functioning warming kitchen with appliances is a drawback because it limits our ability to do the kind of reception, to provide the kind of services that are required. And we did consult with restaurants in Troy who provide catering services, and we said to them, what do you need? And they said, we need a functioning warming kitchen. We need to, not a lot of covers, but where we can come in with our racks, where we can rinse things out, where we can keep things warm. We're not asking for a commercial grade kitchen, obviously. To me, and I know it sounds insignificant to you, but that line of sight is really important because if you wanted to bring in a company that you work for or a professional organization that you are a part of for a workshop, a seminar, a full day use of that building, you would want your participants to be able to see the presentation, the PowerPoint. And limiting that visibility, again, limits the kinds of events that you can hold. And we also realize, quite realistically, that once you invest your dollar, you don't want to go back in and redo it again. Now, I understand that when you open a building up, especially a historic building, you find surprises. I'm a veteran of the church and the parsonage, and I understand those surprises. This isn't our first rodeo on old buildings. But I also have confidence in the original architect's view when we ask, can we widen that one archway? And it is an archway. Can we widen it? I was told yes. So I had confidence in that architect's ability to, since he had crawled through every inch of that building, to really look at that. And yes, I agree you don't do something if it's going to structurally damage a building or make it insecure. However, and there was another archway in the building that I was told categorically, no, you can't widen that, it's load bearing. I get that. But to cut that kind of a expense to do the bare bones restoration is, to quote an old volunteer of ours, if you spend a nickel, you want to get a quarter's worth out of it. So maybe you have to spend a dime to get 50 cents. I think that's the kind of decisions that we want to make. Certainly also, I can tell you that we have had an ongoing dialogue with the Historic Preservation program at Eastern Michigan University, which is a graduate program. The director of that program would be excited to partner with the city to provide all the labor to hang period wallpaper, to take that cost off of, because it can be a field school activity for their students, a supervised field school. So leveraging that kind of collaborative work, making it a learning experience for those graduate students would be helpful. Nick away at the budget. Those kinds of opportunities are still available to us.
Thank you, Lorraine. Anyone from council have questions for Lorraine? Councilman Anderson.
Thank you. I would go to the Troy Historical Village as a kid, so I deeply value this. To me, it's two fundamental questions. What do we want to do, and are we getting a fair price for it? And so the $650,000, we are confident that's the absolute bare bones. There's no one else out there that can do it any cheaper. If that's the case, and I don't see any other evidence that it's not, I mean, that's our starting point then. And then it's, line by line, what else can be done? What is the cost of each item? What are the revenue generating opportunities? What are the benefits to the community opportunities? If I could see that, I'd definitely be on board. And I'm definitely on board. I know 655 is a lot of money, but if you look at the total amount we've invested in the Troy Historic Village, it's right in there. So that's what I would like to see to see if we did go more, what that would look like and what the benefit would look like clearly.
Councilman Anderson.
Just a couple of questions. So, and this may be a combination of answers that I get, but how much more for kitchen and appliances? I mean, are we talking another 50 grand or?
I don't know, Kurt.
I don't know. The 655 was an estimate put together by a consultant. I would have to go back to them and ask that we add some of these things back in.
Can you a la carte that though, so you can say, okay, is that a value added, or is it, no, it's a cost prohibitive? It's same thing with the archway, if it's another 30 grand to put a wall up, or remove a wall and shore it up, or whatever you have to do, I mean, that's another conversation that we should have. The other question I had is specifically for Lorraine. You said that there's $33,000 in the grant for this year that you have to spend?
Operationally.
You have spent?
I have to spend.
You have to spend. Okay, can those funds be
No.
directed towards the construction?
No.
Okay, then back to Kurt. Are there any grant opportunities that the city has to help rehab a building
None that I'm aware of.
outside of the village?
I will put on the table that, and the application period is open now. The Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs offers capital projects, mortar and brick money. It's a 1-to-4 match.
Have we pursued that or not?
The city could submit the application. So in other words, if you had put in $750,000, you could ask for a quarter of that. So whatever you put in, they would match, and you would have to be very specific about what you were using those funds for. For example, you could direct those funds towards the windows and door restorations, or that archway, or the mechanical to go in the building. Those funds, you would know if you received the grant. I believe it's in the fall when they make their announcements, and then you would have a full year to use those funds.
So let's say we change that number to 500 and then we get a quarter more, we're almost at the number, right? So is that,
If we get the grant.
if we get the, well, that's what I'm thinking, let's pursue it. Why wouldn't we pursue every avenue to try to get extra outside funding?
Well, it's not quite that easy.
No, I agree with that with the trails and pathways.
You're gonna have
I
to
get
pay
that.
somebody, you're gonna have to pay somebody to do the grant. It's not something you're gonna do in-house. Much like the Trails and Pathway, we hired a company to write the grant and do all that. So, it's not that easy.
I just hate leaving money at the.
I'm not saying available out there, I'm just saying it's not that easy, and it's not a guarantee either.
Right, and there's a cost.
And there's a cost. And there's a cost. Do you have a question for Lorraine?
Yes, I'll try to make it quick. So I'm taking for granted this building has already have HVAC upgrades, right? Or is this part of this cost?
It has, when the building was moved in 2010, which was a pretty sad year, a furnace, a temporary furnace was put in the building. It was never, there was no ductwork, so they're just big,
Broadcast.
Yeah, we broadcast the heat, and it actually goes up through the holes in the floor. The intent was just to keep the building above freezing, so that it didn't deteriorate in the winter.
So this cost includes HVAC updates?
Yes.
Okay. The other question would be, are we going to run into the same, I don't know if this is Kurt or you, but the estimate that we had last year was $630,000, and we only had one bidder at $1.2 million. What are the chances we're going to run into the same thing, where we're at $600,000 and nobody wants to do this type of work because, construction, they're busy building houses where they can
Do it quick.
It's a good guess. I'm not sure. I mean, we don't know, and we try to let this bid, because it is good winter work for construction folks, it might be a little slow. So we try to let the bid in fall like we did last time, and we'd likely do the same with this if we were to continue designing. Is let the bid late summer, early fall, so it does make good winter work to try to get the best prices available, or at least get more than one person to bid on it. We did reach out from the last bid because there were quite a few people that participated in the mandatory pre-bid walkthrough, and asked them why they didn't bid. Some of them because they were busy, some of them because they didn't feel that they met all of the historic preservation requirements. So I think we've learned some lessons from the last time we bid this out, and where we can tailor this to try to get a better response.
So it brings me to my conclusion. You know, I don't restore houses, but I restore cars, and it's along the same lines. You got to have top-of-line craftsmen, and you got to pay them extra money. You're going to run into the same problem. It's going to be a lower estimate, and you're going to have cost overruns. So that being said, when you talk about changing an archway just for traffic flow, if it's not inherent to upgrading the kitchen, getting things in and out of the kitchen, if it's just for traffic, I would want to cut back on something like that, because if that's, that could change the structure of the house, then you're going to have cost overruns there anyway. And you're going to find that wet plaster, yeah, there's only a couple of guys that do that, it's very expensive. So you just have to keep those kind of things in mind.
Just so you know about the final look of the walls, we would prefer to have, we talk to people who do historic interiors. The most dramatic look in the building would be to wallpaper it. So as far as I'm concerned, we're covering up the walls anyway. The most cost-effective way of doing that and repairing the cracks and gaps in the walls would be great. Cover it with wallpaper and give free labor to do that. In terms of the appliances for the kitchen, I'm glad to hear putting the sink in is still there. I didn't know that. Having an electrical service in a warming kitchen that can accommodate a stove would be important. We can advocate for donations of appliances, 50% offs and things like that. That's good sponsorship kinds of things, isn't it? Making the building functional think of yourself, think of the organizations that you are a part of outside of this council. Think about bringing this council and the people in this room into a meeting. If you were going to hold this kind of a meeting in that building, what would you as participants want in terms of functionality? And then answer how you want to do your budget. I would hope that you, because I haven't seen the proposal that OHM has developed with Kurt thus far, I would hope that you would want to put in place a budget figure where there was a good chance of a contractor coming within the bid and finishing it within budget, rather than continually being surprised that he had undershot it.
Any other questions for Lorraine? Thank you, Lorraine.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Tim Baker.
Having Lorraine come up and answer questions helps, so thank you for that. I'm struggling with the concept. I feel like we have two separate entities working side by side but not together on this, and I know that there's been a long history of this, and there's been previous administration issues that have played a role in this, but it's hard. I feel like we're tasked with coming up with a figure, coming up with a budget proposal where the leadership of the village isn't going to be really happy with any of those options, and we have a city management side who's working really hard to try to come up with something that doesn't, scare us to death like the $1.2 million did. But I'm not sure that I'm not sure how to find the solution to that. We haven't seen the OHM report that just came out, so it's hard for them to give their full I don't know, thoughts on it. But the conflict concerns me a little bit, and I hope that it's just it's a short-term conflict, and there's going to be some kind of coming together. And I also understand that, at least for the past 3.5 years that I've been on council, we've said, Lorraine, you need to come up with a way to make more money for yourself and do everything you can. And then you do come to us with a proposal, and you're stuck because it's our responsibility to actually make the infrastructural changes that you need to do it. And so if we don't do it, you're kind of thinking, well, how much support do I really have to actually increase the program and make more money? And maybe I'm putting thoughts and words in your mouth, so I apologize if that's the case. I don't mean to say that. But I understand completely what you're saying about the visual and the sightlines. I think that's important to any venue. The question I have then becomes, you know, is that what we want to do? Do we want to make this a venue for the village as opposed to just doing the bare bones and making it another place that someone can walk through? And I think it's a little unfair to go back to that level of just making it another building that residents and visitors can walk through when we've been talking about for several years making it more of a destination, more of a venue for events. It would be changing course suddenly. Also, I'm very mindful of the fact that we now have a facilities condition report that there's millions of dollars needed everywhere throughout the city, and now we just have to start looking at priorities of what matters when. But for me, I don't want to say let's do a budget, let's put X amount of dollars in the budget without knowing that we could at least get to some kind of happy compromise with the leadership of the village. Because giving them money to do something that isn't going to make them happy, they're not going to, it's not going to be the right use of the money, in my opinion. I know we have an obligation to put money into the building and to make it a certain level, but it seems like a really big missed opportunity potentially if we just do that and leadership at the village can't do with the building what they had hoped. And I appreciate hearing about new grant opportunities. I'd be curious how much it costs to hire a grant writer to look into something like that. I also am mindful we've already spent $100,000 of the $450,000 that we previously approved, and we're no further along in the process than we were. So I hate to just keep spending money to talk about it in next year's budget. And with the other grant things we're dealing with, we do need to make a decision of some sort. I'm in favor of increasing the budget to at least that number, but I think that we've heard some very serious requests that really the range feels are necessary for that project, and I'm curious if they can be incorporated in somehow, and what, like Councilman Henderson said, you know, if doing the archways a small percentage more, or you know, whatever, I want to know those numbers specifically because that could make a big difference. Because I think that ultimately, I know I support the village and the idea of making it and keeping it the gem of our city and having people come visit it. And it's great to hear numbers are up and your programming is increased and everything. And this does have the potential to be a really big, exciting project in the city of Troy. We've got so many businesses that perhaps would come to love and do a conference there. And I don't know, I see that vision, but I am struggling with, it's a lot of money, and then it's a lot of money to spend if no one's really happy with it. So I think we need to come somehow, whether there's more meetings that need to take place or what, but it doesn't seem right, and part of it's our system, the way we have, you know, we're responsible for the property and the buildings, but they are responsible for actually operating it. That there's always going to be a potential for conflict with that, but we need to be able to address that as best we can so that the most amount of people can be happy. So I'm not in favor of delaying the project. I'll cross off number 3 for sure. And whether it's the 1 or 2 options, I think there's really, I think I could go either way on that, recognizing that I'm supportive of funding the project at some level as long as there's at least some satisfaction on all sides.
Councilwoman Horwick?
I think it's easy as board members to come around a table and say, oh, well, we don't need a second floor. Do we really understand what we're discarding with the return on investment by not renovating that second floor? I don't. I'm sitting here saying I'm not sure. I appreciate that staff looked at that number that came in and probably panicked and said council's never going to go for this, and came back with, okay, what's an alternative? And now we're sitting here trying to understand what are the opportunity costs to what we want to do or not do to this building. I think about the experience I had at Western Michigan University. My daughter's wedding reception was there, and we utilized the president's house there. It's a very similar situation. Rented it out, bridal party stayed there, we had the rehearsal dinner there, and it was a lovely venue that was really well utilized. A caterer could come in. So I'm readily seeing, wow, there's a potential for staff that we're asking to make money off of this operationally to pay for itself. I see the potential. I also can just imagine the emails we're going to get if we were to say, oh, just shoot for the moon and do 1.2 million and make it happen. There's this tension between our taxpayers who aren't sitting and understanding fully either. And we all just are kind of guessing. So, in terms of decision making, I don't think we delay further. I guess I want to do, I'm also mindful that we just sold, or aren't we in the, remind me, I did have a lot going on in my family. Did we sell the old schools?
Yes, that the deed has been transferred.
Okay. Is it, from a budgetary standpoint, can we be leveraging the dollars from that sale toward this, or?
I don't know what you purchased it with. If you purchased
No,
with
it's
transportation, what'd you purchase it with? Transportation funds?
It was
I
a
don't know.
donation.
It's a donation, so I don't know if there's any restrictions on that donation.
Okay, because it,
Off the top of my head, it said it was just a general fund
Right.
situation, goes to the general fund.
okay.
Oh, the revenues?
Yeah.
Okay. It's probably, no, it was probably purchased out of the capital projects fund when you bought it.
It was donated.
Okay.
It was a donation to be kept in public purpose, but the owners agreed to revise the donation agreement.
Gotcha.
And we sold it for, off the top of my head, $117,000. I might be wrong.
So it might buy us our archway or our kitchen. I guess I'm wanting to be creative and make sure we understand. I grew up in an old house. I would have given anything to, in my adult life, own an old home, and I didn't because it's so costly. And I don't want to shortchange what we want to do. It's money that's wasted then if we haven't done it right. That's what I'm struggling with, is that opportunity cost there. And I feel like I'm in it over my head. I guess at a minimum, I'm saying the second one, obviously we just need to increase the budget to do the bare bones. And then I'm not opposed to understanding if we can look a la carte at what some of the dreaming is that we want to do, perhaps budget amendments later that say, all right, this makes sense because we can, and I don't even know if that's a possibility if I'm asking you something unrealistic, but I want to get it right, and I'm not sure I'm comfortable that just the bare bones is getting it right for our historical society. And what we ask volunteers to do is really, what you all do is nothing short of a miracle, and you do understand that we get that. And what opportunity are we maybe missing if we don't get this right? So when you're looking for consensus, I'm for sure too with a blending of, can we be making sure we're smart and perhaps looking at the a la carte additions with a full understanding, so even our residents and taxpayers walk that walk with us and understand what we're doing.
It's a fun,
Councilman Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I'm thinking about a lot is the timeline here, and it's what happens if we delay, what happens if we do it now, and one thing that keeps coming back to my mind is the I-75 project and how that's shut down so many of our capital projects for the next 2 years, road-based capital projects. It seems to me there's no better opportunity than right now to get this done. This is something that won't affect traffic really, and it seems like this 2-year period is the best period to get it done. To me, that says, number 2, let's get this done and see what else we can do. That's my take.
Councilman Finney.
it's just a fine line. I mean, you can open up the second floor and make it a gem, and make everything a gem, and have it done without volunteers, so it's done quickly. But you're going to be spending more than $650,000. So it's just, it's a fine line.
I know, and I'm not understanding what I'm losing when I make the trade-off.
Not being a builder, I'm the same way. But just an example, I had a friend of mine, he didn't have us restore his GTO, but he had a 66 GTO. His original estimate, this other shop, was $18,000. When he picked up his car, he spent $48,000.
Councilman Harrison.
I'm kind of a mix between 2 and 3. I say we need to delay the project just so that we can get some of the questions answered that we brought up tonight with regard to, what's the cost of expanding the entryway, what's the cost of, modifying the kitchen. Because, before we can approve anything, we have to have a whole number. And to Councilman Pennington's point, I'd hate to see it, let's say we had another $50,000 and $700,000, and then we get halfway into the project, and guess what, we need another couple $100,000. I've watched Property Brothers and all those, there's something is gonna come up. So it's, 655 is an unrealistic number. Okay? It's just not, we're not gonna make this what it needs to be for 655. Is $1.2 million enough? If we'd approved it $1.2 million, 8 months ago, we might be looking at $1.7 million at the end of the day. So there's just a lot of questions still unanswered. I don't think realistically we can all jump on number 2 without having a few more questions answered. And I think Kurt Bovensee mentioned it. If you wait till the winter, contractors and builders are now scrambling to find indoor projects, and the lion's share of this is going to be indoors. So maybe we do find better quality bids and cheaper contractors.
Any other comments? Councilwoman Abraham.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm definitely ruling out option 3. I think this project has been delayed enough. We've already invested a lot of time, a lot of money from our original approval of the project. To delay it just doesn't feel it's in the best interest of what we've already invested time-wise or capital-wise. I'm inclined more towards option 2 with the understanding of what does it take to do the second floor, what does it take to do the archway, what does it take to do the kitchen. Understand those bits and pieces, and if it made sense and if conditions were right, bring it in as a potential budget amendment. Delaying is just, I hear what you're saying, Dave, I do. You don't even need to have an old house to open up a wall and find things that you weren't expecting to find, right? You could have that on a house that's only 10 years old. I think that's going to happen with any project, and we'll be talking about Civil and Glen next, and certainly we all read the facilities report. That could happen with any project. But we've already sunk money and time into it, so I feel like we need to continue. I'll say proceed with caution and with oversight.
Thank you. Okay. Staff's looking for us to make a decision tonight, so let's make a decision tonight. From what I heard, if I can just try and summarize what I've heard, we're not going to delay the project, is what I think I got consensus from that, from the board. So I think there's consensus to increase the budget to an unknown number, maybe at least 655 is what I think I heard from the consensus of the table. And I think we have excellent staff that can put together a contract that's going to reflect the needs, the minimal needs of the society, which would include the archway, which seems extremely important, and a functional kitchen if you're going to put all this money into this project and you're going to make it a revenue-producing project, then you ought to give them the tools to be able to do that. I can't see that being a lot of money. But, Mr. Miller, I'm sure staff can put together a contract with to reflect the needs of the society and the city.
Do you mean an actual contract?
That's $700,000.
And that would include the archway and the kitchen? Is that?
I think I want to make sure that the society gets what they need in order to be able to function. If you're going to spend all this money, it just seems to me you ought to give them the tools to be able to do it. And if something happens as it does with most projects that happen in the city, whether it's repaving, whether it's
A crash wall.
crash wall. You know, Councilwoman Abraham said it, you know, it's not unusual for us to have to come back because of things that happen. They happen, and if that's the case, then this council can deal with that next year.
Easy for you to say.
Might want to summarize that thing.
Is that consensus?
Yes, yes.
Mayor, for clarification, your suggestion was $700,000? Yes.
Do we need a break, or should we keep going?
Move forward.
Keep going. Okay, Randy. We'll break at midnight. We'll break in November if you don't like it.
Ready to move on to Sylvan Glen protest?
Well, we have one more tough item to address. And the one thing that I will say that I think Pro Shop and its facilities, the bathroom, the associated locker room, they definitely are a negative impact on the golfing experience there. I mean, I think that's a very true statement. So Dennis Trantham is going to take us through our two different types of options that we would want to consider. We have not budgeted any money for this at this time. And, we'll go from there.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. A few weeks ago, a few months ago, maybe a month and a half ago, we met in here and we discussed the facility condition assessment. And Sylvan Glen was one of the things that came up as more cost effective to replace than to repair. So we put together kind of some issues with the building that we're currently at more than $115,000 worth of needs that should be addressed within the near future. HVAC upgrades, windows and awnings, wood trim repair, flooring, and then renovate restrooms we have as a variable as to what level do we want a locker room or a restroom or what's the need for the facility. Since the original study session, it's been discovered that Sylvan Glen is actually on the historic registry, and that would impact how we renovated that facility. So our total renovation cost, we've come in at about $230,000. The plus sign is there because we don't know what the historic impact is. And that would be, you know, the HVAC, the windows, flooring, restroom remodels, electrical upgrades, awnings. There's significant siding damage from golf balls. And at the end of the day, we're still left with a roof and a structure, right? We've touched everything else. We looked from the building department, we got some numbers, about $300,000 to totally replace that building, based on a 1,200 square foot facility at $250 per square foot. Obviously, a new building would be more energy efficient. It'd be nicer, be more welcoming to guests and our visitors. And at the end of the day, the location still be determined. We've kicked around a couple of different ideas of where it could go, and the Sylvan Glen staff was on board with those locations as well.
Thank you, Dennis. So where we're at is that what should we do? And we don't have any funds set aside for major repairs and renovations. And basically we need to decide the future of the facility. Should we renovate or build new? And to build new, we would have to get permission to demolish those areas that aren't necessary. Now, when I looked through the record today in the historic, there is no report in the file. The property, just quickly in reading it, the property was purchased from the federal government for the homestead, and while this was a Michigan territory. So it's pretty old. It's a difficult call. And as I said before, you know, every year this is a negative draw on the golf experience.
Thank you. I really don't quite honestly, I don't see it as a tough decision if you're going to do something for $70,000. The potential when you start going into that building, I think, is that it's going to cost more than what you think it's going to cost, because for those of us that have been there and used the facilities, God only knows what's up behind those walls or up in that ceiling. But for $70,000, it just seems to me, if you're going to make the decision to do it, you ought to just, I think it would be a better golfing experience to have it moved up towards the front, is what I've been told by the experts at the golf course. So, Councilwoman Abraham.
If we were to pursue a total replacement, it certainly seems to me to be the better investment. We would still be on the hook, though, to do some level of renovation for the existing building because it's on the historic registry.
Well, first, we would have to do a study to see which parts of the building are exactly historic. Our experience has been that there were some buildings and properties which were put on the local registration without a lot of background research. And our first goal would be to look to see what is the core historic building, which I think is more of the restaurant than these additions, and then see from there, work with the Historic District Commission, I forget what, there's two of them, I forget which one, to see which portions, whether we can demolish this or not. So there would be some investigation into that.
But if we were to replace, we'd still have to, and we were to find out that a portion of that pro shop is part of the historic building, we'd still have to maintain it anyway. So I guess my only point is it wouldn't just be the $300,000.
There are provisions that it could be demolished in the ordinance, even if it's historic.
So there's the potential for renovation may not be there if
Correct.
provisions for tear down are, okay, very good.
Councilman Henderson.
So I'm with the mayor on this one with regard to if we do anything to close to the 230,000, that's a small step to go to 300. The big question I have is, you know, I've spent a lot of time at Silverman Golf Course, and I mean, you know, when you go to other old golf courses, you expect old facilities, and that doesn't offend me as a golfer. What offends me as a golfer is going in and trying to wash your hands and you can't use the sinks to wash the soap off your, you know what I mean? So, I mean, there are certainly some things that are needed internally in the clubhouse to be able to make it golfer friendly. I mean, there's locker rooms in there, you know, I know they have icicles, those are unnecessary probably at this point. So you could expand the restroom, make it nicer. I've never been in a ladies' bathroom, so I don't know the condition. I assume it's just as bad. So I would think $115,000 that's a great price for trying to remodel that and make it nice and usable for the employees and the clients as well. To take the step from 115 to 300, that's a bit more of a big question for me.
Councilman Pennington.
Well, it's no question it's historic. If you've ever been in those bathrooms, they're very historic. It's kind of a no-brainer. You just figure out where, demo it. And, so the idea is to demo that one and put another building not in that spot, put another building closer to the golf course?
Our initial investigation, yes.
Yeah, that would be the way to do, because you could still do when you look at that building, it's obviously that's been added on. I mean, it's obvious to me that that's been added on, so that should be a no-brainer to a historic district, hopefully, to allow us to do that. And then you can still do a face it, do a refacing to where make it look good.
Look titanium.
Yeah.
Question I have on the clubhouse that exists, if you demolish that, isn't that where the carts are stored underneath that structure, right? Where are they kept?
There's a garage, I think, further towards Rochester.
So up underneath the main part of the building rather than, okay.
Councilman Hamilton.
Thank you. So the $115,000 cost, that doesn't include renovating the restroom, right? So is the 230 really the bare minimum we could do, or is that's assuming 115 for the restroom, or is? What are we talking as like
The two
bare
thirty
bones least thing we have to do?
So the $115,000 plus the restroom renovation costs, whatever they came to be, would be the more urgent cost.
Mhm.
The 230 would be the more long-term cost.
Okay. And what do we think the short-term cost of the restroom? I know you said variable, but is there any ballpark figure?
I would venture to guess about $60,000 to renovate those. Because if we were to extend the restrooms into the showers, we'd virtually break the entire floor out of the bathroom, relay the pipe underground. So it'd be a pretty extensive remodel.
So it'd be $175K already for a short-term fix.
And again, you're opening up a can of worms possible.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker?
Thanks, Mayor. I think I'm in favor of maybe looking at doing a new structure altogether. And I know it looks like we're spending money here and there, but part of our job is to put money into these facilities that both the Barnard House and the Sylvan Glen Pro Shop were on our facilities condition assessment report. So it's expected that those are supposed to be dealt with or looked at. It's hard to see spending almost 200 grand on a short-term fix when you go up to another 30 or 40 and you're still not dealing with a great thing. You go up a little bit more and you've got a new structure, assuming everything lines up. I mean, I hate to find out we're going to do that, but then we can't demolish the old one, and then we've got this old one that we have to deal with still. And so, I mean, there's still some variables there. But to me, it makes sense to put money into getting updated facilities altogether and not trying to put lipstick on that.
Councilwoman Hogan, did you have?
Yeah, assuming you can demolish and replace seems the most effective use of our dollars.
Just a quick one. Yeah, the annual revenue and budget for Sylvan Glen is $1 million. So it's like a 30% of the annual budget one time, and then it's good for what? How long would it be good after that for?
Or the whole year.
Exactly, so.
At least till the next
Obviously,
council.
with ongoing maintenance, right? But
Yeah, right. But yeah, over a 30-year period, 20-year period, it seems to be the best option is the 300K.
Henderson, you had another comment?
Just one question on the existing structure. Let's say we do build the new structure and put it in a nice convenient place. Do you have to get rid of the old structure?
Well, we haven't really looked at a lot of study yet, so, but we wouldn't want to spend dollars to renovate anything. So we'd have to do something, and maybe, and we'd have to investigate it. Maybe demolition is the best option, but we'll have to take a closer look at it.
But it could stay there for zero cost, right? Just whatever it costs.
Still, it's
But
maintained.
it's ugly.
Yeah.
Falling apart.
You could move it to the village.
Okay. I think you got consensus.
Yes.
Just so we know from a cash flow perspective, it will be probably a loan from the general fund to pay for this, because I don't believe that Sylvan Glen will have the cash after buying that $1 million irrigation system to do it, so. But again, they'll be able to pay them back over a couple years of operations, we're hoping, unless some other capital comes up. Just want to make sure
That's the
full
whole-
disclosure will come out of unassigned fund balance in the general fund for the first couple of years.
Understood. I just think, having gotten that facilities report, we're going to be dealing with probably every budget now for the next years, some facility in the city that's going to need something. So this is just a start, I think, of what you're going to have to deal with.
Mayor, we're at the point where we're going to inform you about some issues in the future, and I would like to ask our staff to try to be as brief as possible.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The Troy Family Aquatic Center will be opening for its 28th year. We listed some of our features that we've had since it's open. Each year we serve more than 40,000 guests and we hire approximately 78 to 80 employees. Tom's going to review some revenues and expenditures.
Oh, I am? Okay. Super. Okay, so really, why do we have this as an issue? Well, for one thing, As you can see, this is a working capital, so it's a little bit different numbers than you got, but what's been going on with working capital? Again, we got about 150,000 in working capital, and overall, we're gonna have between 230,000, right? If you look at the bottom right, that's kind of where our working capital has been, right? What's not on here, and is not budgeted, is what, about 230,000 worth of capital expenditures? Elaine, you wanna talk about the capital?
Just one piece, or one play structure is $250,000. So, that doesn't count heaters, the pumps, the tile work. No.
So, right, so the question is, right, we got some significant capital that's just gonna need to probably pretty much wipe the fund out, right, to buy the capital. The question's gonna be based on, if you want to.
It becomes a general fund problem at that time, because the Aquatic Center will not be able to afford this.
Right, well, the issue is, do we wanna put money into the Aquatic Center if it's dated, so it's useful life?
And there's no specific action that we're requesting, it's just, we think it's an important issue that's out there, and we should know about it.
Councilwoman Hoare?
Visiting the Aquatic Center, I think it's, how many years old now?
28.
28 years old. I've lived here 30 years, it was built new, we were so excited about it, and I can see that it's definitely getting tired, because I do sneak in and go on the Tubi slide even now without my kids. And I like to see its use, but how many of the 40,000 guests that are visiting, is it our Troy residents using it, or are we becoming kind of a county-wide amenity, or do we have a sense of that?
When I checked last year, it's almost 50-50 actually.
Okay.
Probably more 48-52%.
But Elaine, generally our experience is on the hottest days, when other facilities are at max, is when we get most of our non-residents.
Okay. It's on a normal.
And the county park.
Okay, county park gets filled and then,
Capacity,
okay.
And those are the hottest 95 3 days.
Along those lines, are we maxing out capacity on those busy days?
Yes.
Okay. So have we ever looked into possibly upping our cost for non-residents?
Non-residents do pay more already.
Right.
In the last couple of years, we've increased all of our prices for day passes, season memberships, the food at the concession stands.
So that's been ongoing.
We're, at our price points, we actually make, our gate prices are what Red Oaks and Waterford, what Red Oaks charges.
It's amazing how low the CapEx prices are. I mean, what we spend for CapEx is very low.
Okay.
Just a quick comment. I think, when we do the survey with citizens and find out some direction, maybe with the Civic Center property, will also be a good indicator as to what you could or you couldn't do with the Aquatic Center, In the perfect world, maybe you get somebody else to relocate it and build a brand new one. We'll see what the survey says.
Okay. Trails and pathways. So we have our strategies which we adopted this year. The first one is that we're going to reevaluate trails and pathways programs and focus on public participation and creative problem solving. But we also are going to update our Parks and Recreation Plan and incorporate the Green Space Subcommittee recommendations to protect and invest in our parks. Because we don't know where to put trails and pathways right now, we included in our budget for the next coming up year $25,000, which is a considerable decrease from previous years, to allow us to sort of plan where we're going to go, and then put annually in the capital budget $200,000 for, in a total of $1 million in total over a couple of years for construction. It was really tough for us to dedicate so much money in the capital plan we had when we had so many other needs, and we're having such difficulties finding where to really put the pathway right at this time. But I think a continued focus on our part, I know I'm dedicated to it, I know Kurt is, to try to get trails and pathways in our community, but the problem is we've got to figure out how to deliver it.
Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Thank you, Mark, for the explanation. I had asked a question after our last meeting, because it was my understanding that our previous direction for this council was to allocate $750,000 a year and to carry over what we didn't spend, and to see that the budget had changed dramatically this year was a little bit of a shock. I guess I understand completely what you're saying, and Tom's looking at me like, please don't try to spend more money. I don't know. I can see the daggers and the infrared coming, but I guess I can see it. We spend some money this year to come up with plans, and we're putting away a little bit for the next 5 years, but that kind of money won't do any kind of trails and pathways system over those next 5 years. And so we may come up with the greatest idea, but we'll have no money banked away to do anything with it. And I know the mayor's spoken about this at length. There was $3 million put away at one point. The economy changed, and that had to be redirected. I hate to assume, but I'd assume this, maybe you're not thrilled with this idea because it's against what you've been saying for several years. And
Not at all.
it's hard for me too, only because 4 years ago I threw a big fit when the trail was supposed to come through my neighborhood, and then I got elected on council and see things a little differently. But it's
Oh, that was you.
it was me. But it seems like we're letting this go away when I see this, and that may not be your intent, and I know you care about it because we've had lots of conversations about it over the years, but this to me doesn't reflect a community that's investing in this kind of outdoor recreation, and maybe our new survey will show something different. Previous surveys have said that this was a high priority. You look at other communities around us who are investing a ton of more money, and it doesn't have to be dedicated paths. They're doing it in dedicated bike lanes on streets and all kinds of different options. And this is, I guess, disappointing, and I don't know how else to say it. When I think that we have a great start with the trail, the path, the first segment that we've done, and obviously we have neighborhood friction as to where we go, and there's all those issues, but I see this as a punt that will not lead us towards the future of trails and pathways in the city.
Councilman Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. To your point, one thing I do see if you look in the capital projects fund, page 256, you'll see that over the next 3 years, the capital fund balance is growing quite substantially. Its estimated amount after this year is 8.1 million, after next proposed year 9.5 to 11.8 to 13.5. It's based on a lot of assumptions, but it seems like over the I-75 era, we are growing that fund to almost $5.5 million. So maybe in a sense, we could say we're saving potentially for the trails with that, but I respect your point, maybe you could have a dedicated savings towards that purpose as well. But there is going to be more money in that capital account in a few years.
That's true, but we did hear from Mr. Dowling regarding that fund, why, the purpose of building that up for capital projects. But I can't tell you how disappointed I am to see this. I thought we were moving in a good direction. I know it's difficult to find those paths, but I thought we had alternatives. We were looking at I-75. We had about 2 or 3 other options that we were looking at, and I don't know what's happened there, but I even remember talking a couple of years ago that as much as I like taking our fund balance and dedicating it to specific capital projects, we do that a lot for roads, and I don't see why we can't do that for this. And I would just like to see this council make a decision that we are going to use and dedicate that to trails and pathways, and let's get very aggressive with putting together a plan. We've been saying that for 5 years. Where's the plan? Where's the plan? And we just have to get aggressive putting the plan together. And this isn't going to do it. That's my 2 cents. Councilman Henderson.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we committed mentally to $750,000 a year. I understand that, the difficulty in all this, going through neighborhoods, nobody wants it there, and specifically the last end of the next section that we were talking about, ending in Belzaire subdivision. I get it. They have a park there that they maintain. They don't want a lot of traffic there and that sort of thing. So I get the desire not to have it go through those areas. But are there other ways that we can look at, at the termination of that where we're going to go left into Belzaire sub? Couldn't we have gone right through the DPW area and make a path out to Rochester Road? So I think we have to start thinking a little bit differently to utilize some of the properties that we do have control over to be able to continue the project. I will say that I drove down, I chanced my way on I-75 southbound, and I was a little bit surprised how close I-75 is to the fence. So, is that a practical solution, still going down I-75 to continue that leg of the pathway? I think that's something that we need to think about as well.
I think it's on the north.
It's on the other side?
Yeah.
Okay. Answers that question.
Just
I haven't
second
been on the north side yet, so
Home yourself.
a little messed up. So, yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that we should do. But if we postpone for 3 years, bank $600,000, and then continue on $750,000, we got a little over $1 million to spend in year 3. And hopefully between now and then we can put a good plan together and utilize some of those funds.
Let's see if we can't get it planned quick. That would be my Councilwoman Abraham.
Just a quick question. How did you arrive at 200,000 as maybe the bogey for those years versus the 750,000? Was it taking into account potential capital projects that were anticipated, or?
I would say both, and Tom, you can add to it. One, we had lots of capital needs that were not meeting those needs. And second, we just don't have the physical projects to build at this time, because we really need to go back and do a new Parks and Recreation plan with a focused effort and trails and pathways, and come up with a system which our community is going to accept, because everything we've done to this point really the community has rejected.
I get that, Mark, and
Yeah.
you don't have to hit me upside the head too many times to tell me to don't go through the neighborhoods. So let's try and find a plan, not going through the neighborhoods.
Right. But right now, we don't have
I get it.
projects to support 750,000. Shoot me, Tom. If council wants to allocate it, tell us, we'll do it, and we'll do it. Because I get it, you take money away, it may not ever come back, because who knows what council will be here and who else will be in this seat here.
I think the idea, if I can, Mr. Mayor, right, at least get $1 million over, the 5 years, right? That we've got something on the table. The issue is, you're right, we don't have a specific project, right? The issue is that we also have some roads, and you can see that we budget, so fund balance is growing over the next couple, 3 years, right? So that we can address it, right, after the I-75. Okay, maybe our roads needs are a lot larger than what we thought, so you still can balance that against the trails and pathways when we're actually doing something, or maybe we've identified a project at that point that you want to allocate money to. But just allocating it for, until we've got something more solid, without thinking about some of the roads or potential building things from the building assessment that we might want to tackle in the next couple of years. We just want to put that together so you're considering them at the same time, right? As opposed, and again, that's why we budgeted for an increase in fund balance, so you can do it at a later date, maybe if we get a better idea of what the scope and where the project of the trails and pathways are going to go. We can always amend the budget at any time we want. The idea was to just have some money there. It's a starting point.
Councilman Pennington?
Yep. You're going to find with this survey that trails and pathways are very important to the residents. We've been through this many times. And
Sure.
And to bring it down to basically 0 for this year is kind of distressing to what we've been talking about for the last 5-6 years. So, right, I would, like Mayor said, I would want a plan in place quickly so we could. And is it $25,000 for this year? Is that enough to have someone dedicated to getting a plan together?
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay. So I'd want to see that also.
Councilwoman Horder, do you have a question?
Well, again, the survey should confirm or not confirm what we're assuming as we sit at this table. And since we have other capital needs that of immediate term. Let's get that confirmation, get that plan, and, you know, we can be back at the table of next year's budget, looking at maybe we're going to be reallocating it at that point. Certainly don't want to signal to the members of the community that value this idea that we don't, because we do, but we're trying to balance capital needs right now. In there, we did come up against brick walls in terms of where we wanted to take the next legs. The new one that's here behind Zion Church and Walsh College is absolutely beautiful, and I encourage residents to to go check that out and experience that, and know that we have not lost sight of the vision, even as we move forward. I think we're all afraid of maybe sending a signal that actually doesn't reflect our desire long-term. We're still allocating the funds, creating that budget for it. We'll get the plan, we'll get the confirmation in the survey, and we're going to keep marching forward on valuing this, as many communities do. I think is what, I should only speak for myself, but I suspect we're all sitting here nodding at one another. But
Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
Also, I feel like we put a lot on Kurt to do some of these projects, fix the shuttle, come up with a trail and pathway, keep our roads flat. I mean, I don't know if we're continuing to just, not that you're not doing a great job, but I don't know if it's too much for you to have to try to balance all of our competing interests, plus the whole the cities, the residents. I don't know what the other options are to make sure that Kurt has the support and the staff has the support they need for all of that. But I don't want to cut money out and still continue with the same stuff we've been going on, because that's not going to solve the problem or take us to the next level. And I guess for the record, I will say that I would prefer to keep the money we've previously allocated in the budget, but I may be on a short list of that.
Councilman Henderson.
Just one comment about the survey. The survey is great, and I'm sure we're going to get some great information, and probably it'll come out and it'll say that people by and large would like trails and pathways. But if you took that same survey and surveyed the people along those potential lines of trails and pathways, you'd be a resounding zero. So, we have to be cautious with the results of a survey even, so.
right.
Well, it's just like building them. Everyone likes building in progress as long as it's not near them.
Right.
So we budgeted $1 million over the last 5 years, right? Over the 5 years budget. Do you want us to, on the line here, do you want us to change that to something different?
Well, I'm with Mayor Pro Tem Baker. I want to continue with the vision that we talked about for 3 years. If you're asking me, that's what I want to see us do. I understand that we set aside $750,000 and we don't have anything to spend it on. Is that the right thing to do? But in this particular case, I don't think you're wasting your money by putting it aside. Even if you don't do it this year, then you've got more money to use towards accomplishing maybe another mile or a mile and a half the following year. What's most important is to get this plan together, I think. We've been talking about this at least for 2 years, that we have to have a plan in place so that we know where we want to go next. So I'm okay with doing that, but let's do it. And if we have to get some help doing it, but I think in the next 6 months, if we can find another mile to do, let's do it. And maybe we can come revisit it after the plan's in place. Maybe that's the best thing to do right now.
I'd agree with that. So we do have formal direction.
Right. Agreed. Stay on the path.
And the trail.
Library funding.
All right, well, I do realize that I am to library what Mr. Bill Hooter is to roads, but in the interest of keeping it brief, I will do my best. So you very kindly included future library funding. Oh, I'm sorry.
You got a rep now.
You very kindly included future library funding in strategy number 5, so based on that, it is useful to take a look and see what's going on with the library budget these days. So before we dive into the numbers, what I want to let you know is, so right now today, we are in the third year of the 5-year millage. So our proposed budget for 2020 covers the 4th year of the library millage, and then our 2021 budget covers the 5th and last year of the current library millage. The 2022 proposed budget would be the first year of whatever is going on, and where we use the numbers based on what we know. So those numbers represent what our current 0.7 millage. So let's talk about those numbers. So in our 2020 proposed budget, you can see that the revenues are just under $3.7 million. And I want to point out to you that that's not just millage revenue, that's our total revenue, so fines and fees and money we receive from the state and so forth. Our expenditures are just over $4 million. So Mr. Darling has very kindly provided us a chart, and we don't have to do the math in our heads. You can see that there is a shortfall of $327,000, $327,120. Why the shortfall? Well, as you know, and you can see over the life of the millage, there's been a shortfall. Capital repairs. The library has spent a lot of money on capital repairs over the last several years. How do we address that gap between revenue and expenditure? Well, we use the library's fund balance to shore up that gap. And I want to make it clear that it is the library's fund balance. It's not the city's fund balance. It is the library's fund balance. So over the course of the last 3 years, you can see that we used $206,000 in 2017. In our current budget year, we're looking at $662,000, and then for next year, again, the deficit of $327,000. So, I want to also mention to you that for the first time in the library millage history, the city is going to be assuming the cost of the library's capital repairs to the tune of $104,000, and you saw that on the slide on Thursday night. The city is also covering the cost of the library roof, which is estimated at $1.2 million. The library is able to pay for its library materials budget, which resides in the capital budget. We can cover that expense. But that is about all we can do, and as you can see, just projecting out as the library continues to cover the cost of its materials budget, but assuming, of course, that the city will kindly continue to pick up our capital repairs or not, but just with the library covering the cost of its materials budget, you can see that by 2022, the library's fund balance will be significantly depleted, almost to zero. And here's a slide that illustrates that. So we are dropping well below the 20 and 30% cap. So this is, of course, something to bring to your attention. Again, the library millage expires on June 30th, 2021. So it is our hope that a sustainable funding source will be identified in order to continue library operations beyond that June 30th, 2021 date. And again, this is just for information to put it on your radar or any future discussion that you would like to have.
Thank you. Anyone have any comments regarding that? Well, I just like to, I don't know if we're going to piggyback in the discussion on the committee that we're forming.
Yes, we are.
So my comments kind of are intertwined with that discussion regarding the library. So I don't know if you want us to move towards that, or do you want some discussion just on the library itself?
No, we can wait we have a section for the charter revision committee. Tom is just going to quickly go through why bond ratings are important really quickly, and we'll then get to the charter revision committee, because I know you want to talk about that.
All right, so there was a question from last Thursday that we're addressing. Just talk a little bit about the AAA bond rating, or A bond rating, and why it's important to the city. As you know, and we've long prided ourselves on our AAA bond rating, which is a rating by the loaning industry, Standard & Poor's or Moody's, Fitch's, which grades the city on its ability to pay off its debt. What is its financial stability? AAA is the best rating that you can get. In fact, it's a rating better than the state in which the city of Troy resides. So why is a bond rating good, right? Why do we want a AAA bond rating? Well, it is a way to provide residents and businesses to show that our commitment to the community for fiscal stewardship and financial sustainability, okay? We have, obviously, the rating shows that we are fiscally responsible. A AAA bond rating is a testament to that. It also is a tool to attract new residents and businesses. I'm sure as a new business, they look at the community that we're projecting to put in investment in, and are they fiscally responsible? Are they good financial stewards? It also saves the taxpayer dollars, which I like, right? In fact, as a illustrative purposes, the last bond that we did was a 2013 bond issue in which we bonded about $14–15 million. And typically, the difference between a AAA bond rating and a AA+, which would be the next one down, is at least 50 basis points, typically. I mean, it depends on what market you're in, but you can bet it's typically going to at least be 50 basis points. So that 50 basis points on that $14 million over 20 years is going to save the taxpayers over $1 million. So that's a great reason why it's important. And now, let's just break this all. Make that one. The only other things you see, there's a lot of things that go into, say, Standard & Poor's giving the city a AAA bond rating. It's not just one thing, it's several things. You know, do we have budget policies? Do we have a long-term financial plan, a long-term capital plan? Do we have investment policies, management policies? And of course, a big one, reserves and liquidity policies, because cash talks. Right? That's it. Thank you.
So the last topic is Charter Revision Committee. We're asked to do really quick. It's an advisory committee, and they meet to discuss and develop recommendations regarding the city's charter. And then forwards the recommendations to council for consideration and possible placement on the ballot for adoption by the electors of the city. The city clerks acts as staff liaison and secretary, and the city attorney also is a representative to the committee. And I was asked what topics should be discussed at this committee, so we're here to listen.
Thank you. I guess the first question to ladies is, when are you going to convene this committee? Is it date specific?
So I'll start, and again, Ms. Dixon and I will be working together very closely on this as we have in past years. But it's helpful to us to know what the topics are and to have the direction, so a resolution from council before we actually convene the committee. So it's helpful if we, in that resolution, would have the topics that you would like them to look at. Obviously, whatever they do, it's a recommending body. It comes back to council. Council decides what the final language is if they want to proceed and place something on the ballots.
Correct.
So we're ready to do that as quickly as we can. We just we want to. It would be helpful to have the subjects there. And I don't know if Ms. Dixon has anything else to add.
Just from the appointment standpoint, currently, right now, there are 2 appointments that are going to expire at the end of April. One person does not want to be reappointed, the other person has requested to be reappointed. So it would be helpful if that open seat were to be filled, or those 2 seats were to be filled before
Is that a
the
council
committee meets.
appointment?
Yeah, it's a mayor's appointment.
It's a mayor's appointment?
I believe so.
No, it's council.
Sorry, council appointment. You threw me out.
We'll get working hard on that then.
I've been on council 7 years. Has this committee ever met before?
Not in 7 years.
It hasn't met since I've been clerk.
2009.
2009.
Right before I was elected to council in 2009, it met and put 6 ballot proposals in 2009.
Recommendation.
I don't think they put any recommendations in 2009. I think most of it was done by council?
It was actually administrative recommendations. We had to deal with some cleanups in 2009, and so we did ask for convening, and it was November of 2009. At that time, election of mayor pro tem, city manager, we didn't have enough time for the city manager. We needed to extend that. Vacancies in elective office, irrevocable letter of resignation, and filling vacancies in elective office, as well as nominations. So those were the things that were addressed. Some of that was a cleanup with the big changes to the Michigan law with the election process too. So that is the last time that they did meet.
I think my recollection is that they used to meet quite often before 2009, and then I think they changed their rules to not meet unless council asked them to meet, that they were kind of wasting their time by meeting on a monthly basis or quarterly. So I'm just going on my memory.
Yeah. Mayor, I can just tell you that that it has been an as-needed, committee, and I've been working for the city for 25 years. It has never met on a regular basis during my tenure. Again, I can't speak to what they were doing prior to that, but at least for 25 years, we've not been meeting on a regular basis.
I'm the one that kind of asked to have this brought up today, and it was not my intent to discuss all of those issues tonight, but maybe to just think about maybe some things that you would want to have them take a look at. And if I could, I'll start. Every time I read the charter, I'm offended by the language that refers to everyone as a man, or I don't, for the life of me, know why this has taken so long to have somebody make it gender neutral. But I think it's a quick fix, but I think especially in today's world that I'm just offended every time I read it, and I can just imagine others that should be offended by it too. So I would like them to take a look and just clean up the language and make it gender neutral instead of referring to every position as a man. Just a little bug I've had, and I've been talking to them for 5 years about it. I'd like to have them take a look at the millage cap and give some input to us regarding the cap. And if I could just give you a little history, at least my recollection on how that happened. Back in 2008, I believe, it was a 4-3 vote by council, my recollection, and I believe the two council persons, one that recommended and one that seconded it, didn't even run for council the next year. So I find that interesting. But it wasn't, at least my recollection, it wasn't something that the entire council was in favor of.
I believe it was an initiatory petition instead.
Maybe I'm thinking of something else.
But again, council would need to approve the language even with an initiatory petition. So Mayor, I think that's probably what you're referring to is the actual language that was approved for the ballot question. Again, it's stretching my memory too because it is November of 2008.
And it's not my intent tonight to talk about the merits of it or whatever. It's just that I think at this point I can see what that is going to do to us in the future. And I just would like to get some input for me and maybe the community from the committee to revisit that issue. Because I do think it hamstrings this council and it hamstrings the administration. And every year I have to sign a resolution and send it to Lansing. Is it a congressional? Yeah. And it takes everything in my power to put my signature on that, because I don't want to put my signature on it. Instructing them to encourage term limitation as a constitutional amendment. I would just like to see that gone. For whoever is the mayor, or, you know, but I would like to see them take a look at that, very simple.
And that's from 1994.
Yeah.
November of 1994.
And that actually, I just researched today, that was it was a multi-city, that happened in multiple cities at the same time, where a group put that language together and then pushed it through, like Utica, Muskegon, there's a bunch of different cities in Baltimore, they all had the same proposal on their ballot.
And also another initiative petition.
And the only other thing for me was the library millage and issue that I would like to see. Everything that I'm seeing here in the future shows that council needs to make a decision before the next ballot proposal. And I just would like to tell you that I was here and was the person that initiated the .7. And we did that as a temporary look to try and keep the library going at its minimum. Okay? And we did it for 5 years, and we did it for 5 years for a reason. And that was to maybe after 5 years we could take a look and see what the real direction of having a library millage should be. I've always been a proponent of it being a standalone library with its own millage, with its own board. But I just think it's time that maybe this committee take a look at some alternatives for the millage, because it's going to be 10 years of a decision that we made for maybe for 5 years. And I think it's a long time coming that we should be taking a look at a long-term sustainable library and not having to deal with this every 3 years is really what you have to deal with this every 3 years. And with the same fear that if it doesn't get passed, we're talking about closing the library or laying people off. We're back to where we were at square one. So I think we just need to take a look at a long-term solution to the library. Instead of stop doing these 5-year, everybody wants the library, we know that. We don't need to ask the people anymore, do you want to continue your library? So now I think you need to look at a long-term solution.
Or like a 10-year?
10-year, or a standalone, or let's have the committee give us some options that we can think about. Do you want to increase the millage to have a 7-day library? I think that's, I mean, let's get all the information that we possibly can.
Some of that's going to come out in the survey.
Some of that's going to come on the survey, too. But it's just my opinion that what we did back in 2011, was it? Was a temporary look. And I think that look now is telling us today we want to have a permanent library. Let's just find a way to have a long-term permanent library now. So those are my 4 things that I would like to see. And if there's consensus around the table, that's fine, or if you want to add or subtract. Councilwoman Horwick.
I think those are all great questions. My concern is the timing. And I know we have this as one of our strategies, essentially a budget year strategy. To be blunt, I think to start to tread down this path, we might be putting ourselves at risk of being in the same position we were 10 years ago when some of these topics would be at risk of becoming essentially a political football, depending on what the charter review team came back to us with as we head into elections in November for 3 council seats and mayor. I would like these explored. I think the timing is, I would like the survey to happen. I want to hear where our residents are. Based on that, you know, convening this group, I'm absolutely on board with you, but I think we need to be very tender with the timing and certainly to set us up for the next budgetary discussions to be constructive, but I think we need to be very careful. We're not in an urgent nature on these topics. And I think the timing is important so that the dialogue with our residents, with this charter review, is very open, that no one feels like we're trying to jam something or bring something in, that we just have a very collective dialogue. If we go too fast or create misinformation out there, that could be, I worry about the risk to that because we lived that nightmare 10 years ago. That's why Councilwoman Abraham and I are here at this seat today, is because we became, very engaged in that time frame. So I want to proceed with caution is my reaction.
You have to start sometime to collect your information, and if this council decides that they want to wait a year, or that's a decision. But I think you need to at least start the discussion and see where you want to go. That's why I think starting it in April at least gives you some time if need be. Councilwoman Abraham.
Mayor, I agree. I think we need to start talking about it now, even if nothing, I'll say tangible comes of it for months to come. It makes me think of a different council strategy, and it's number 10. The developing a plan to effectively engage residents and businesses through community conversations. And I feel like this might be the better place to start, is with the community before we start engaging the Charter Revision Committee. I do think we need to do that. I'm just not sure that should happen before we start having community conversations, because I was right there with you in 2011 and in 2010 before that when the Prop 1 failed. And I don't want to go down that path again. And I don't want the perception to be of, well, the council's already engaged the Charter Committee to go look at it, and have the perception be that we've manufactured a crisis. I'd like to start engaging the community now through the survey, through these dialogues, which is also a council strategy, before we engage the Charter Revision Committee. I think all 4 of the ideas that you suggest are good ones, but I think we may hear more from the community. There may be a 5th or 6th that that also rises to the top. So while I'm not fundamentally opposed to asking the Charter Revision Committee to be resurrected, I don't think now is the right time. I'd rather get the citizens engaged, whether it's through the survey or for the community conversations first.
I would agree. If we're gonna look at the charter, this is something that I had talked about years ago, and I hadn't brought it up since then. But a raise for city council. If we're going to look at the charter, I know Lori Bloom I talked to her when I was on council, and when you talk to citizens, they're shocked that we only get $170 a month compared to other cities that are a minimum of $400 or $500. I would look at that. I remember talking to Ellen, and I talked to Dane. I'd always also talked to Wade Fleming when I was, junior council member, and they all said, well, you can't bring that up. I mean, you'll never get elected in this town. It's like, well, you know, I wasn't in it to get reelected, but, so now that it wouldn't matter, and I'm only in it for 2 more years, I think, you know, it shouldn't be a hardship for someone that doesn't have the finances, that, you know, the resources, if they want to spend the time and be on city council, because we are expected to donate to charitable causes and to be at many events that it cost us quite a bit of money, you know, some money, and I would look to and Lori told me you had to change the charter, so I would like to look at that for council, you know, see what council thinks about that, or residents, or a combination of both, or if nothing else, a electronic stipend like some other cities do.
Good time to clarify that we don't get a salary with benefits or an office or a car. It's volunteer, essentially. And I don't think a lot of people understand that. And it's no different for the mayor than it is the other council members. So.
When you talk to most people, you know, 80–90% of the people in Troy think that, you know, it's a salary with at least a pension or some type of benefit.
Full benefits.
Right.
I don't think there's anything wrong with asking the committee to take a look at that and getting some input. Councilman Henderson?
Just to piggyback on that, you know, the pay is for 2 meetings a month. It's not for grand openings. Every community operation that happens throughout the month. I think Councilman Baker and I, Mayor Pro Tem Baker and I, last year or the year before, put together our calendars, and I think there were like 75 events that we went throughout the year. So I mean, there is a lot more to this job than just two meetings a month. So in an election year, I'm not sure I can get behind that because I don't want to be perceived as benefiting from it. So if you exclude the mayor position and the charter amendment, I'll be okay with it.
See, another year goes by, I can't bring it up.
I think it's fair if they're going to convene the charter, let them make it. You know, you don't have to follow what they say. You know, it's just a recommending body. So
functionally, since we haven't gone through a charter revision or placement on a ballot, so let's use the example of the document that the mayor has to sign once a year. Mm-hmm. So we would form language, vote on that, and put it on. The question would actually be on a ballot.
Yes, the Charter Revision Committee would be advisory, and they would make recommendations to you, and then council would decide. Of course, we would help draft that for them and with them. And then council would decide what the question, the form of the question, the final form of the question, council would vote on that. Then council would also likely do an educational piece as well, and that they would approve the educational piece, and then that would go to the voters.
So the voter question would essentially be amend the charter to remove the provision that the mayor has to sign that document. Is that
correct?
Okay.
There are a lot of limits that we've got language. We've got, you know, it has to be within the allocated number of words. It has to be 100, less than 100 words. So it involves a lot of Mystics and my work on the front end, so to accomplish the goals.
When they did that, it was a line and a half.
And it would be, so let's say we had 4 items. We could have 4 separate questions on the ballot, rather than one that says, let's change the charter to.
No, it's
all these 4 things.
You have to have, it has to be one topic. So you could have more topics, but you couldn't have the same question you couldn't ask the same question 4 different ways.
Okay, so if again, going back to the 4 or 5 points that the mayor brought up, if we agreed, we would have 5 separate questions about 5 separate issues. Changing the making gender neutral would be one question. Removing that, okay.
Correct.
Got it.
Councilman Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm also not sure that the Charter Revision Committee is the place to start these conversations, but the one thing I'd be interested in is just there's 31 chartered cities in Oakland County. So I would like to see a comparison of our charter to other municipalities within Oakland County, within the Tri-County area, and get a sense of where our big deficiencies versus good things we have in there, and get a sense of how different charters work for different communities. That's really what I'm interested in, and to me, that's the first step. General neutral language sounds good, but again, I don't know if charter revision committee is the place for that. I mean, we could just put up a resolution to say make it gender neutral, pass it quickly, and get it on the ballot without even that. Probably seems like an obvious thing to just do without even having a committee. But that's my take on it.
Yeah, that one is rather easy.
That's the easy one.
That's the easy one. Mayor Pro Tem Baker.
I like your ideas and your thoughts. I do think we need some more time, though, to further think about it. Hearing everyone, the timing issues, a good point. The research, if we're going to convene, it'd be nice to see how our charter compares to other comparable cities. We're always better, obviously, but just in case there's something we can improve upon. I don't feel the rush to do it right away, to get started. Conversations, yes, but to get the committee convened and get this agenda ready, I don't personally feel ready to do that yet. But as the year progresses, I'm certain we'll get more information based on tonight's meeting, and it'll make more sense for me, anyway. So I can't give consensus tonight to start that process.
So is there consensus or not?
Oh, yeah.
Consensus? Consensus? No? 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 4 no's? I am going to propose a resolution then.
Okay.
Okay?
I would be willing to have the city create the language for a gender neutral charter amendment to maybe be on the ballot this year without even needing the committee, and maybe investigate that. I'd like to get consensus on that, because to me that doesn't really, it's a pretty straightforward thing, just change everything and get it on the ballot and get it approved.
Well, we can bring it up when the resolution comes up.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll include that in the resolution.
I think the other one's kind of a no-brainer too, but.
The mayor should, I don't think
that
future mayor
that's not
should
even
be
city
compelled to sign
council's
anything
Right.
year after year. I don't know if it can be amended to put a prohibition on requiring a future mayor years from, 25 years later to have to sign something. I mean, that to me is more, I think that's, well, we can talk about it later with the resolution.
That doesn't belong in a city council scenario, I don't think.
Right.
Hey, believe me, I've been doing it for 6, 7 years, and every time I have to do it,
Regardless of the merit, I mean, it could go on
Right,
the
right.
topic, I mean,
it's ridiculous. It's just
when's
ridiculous.
the next one due?
January.
It's just one signature, gee.
Okay. Anything else, Mr. Miller?
I don't think so, no.
Anyone in the audience wish to make a comment this evening? Thank you for coming. We're adjourned.